Brothers and sisters, I want to, first of all, just express my gratitude to the Cumberland County Progressives and to the Institute for Economic Justice for getting us together and for sponsoring this. And when I came in, I really felt the energy in here and the depth of the discussion. And in that sense, it wasn't superficial. People were grappling after weighty pieces of reality so that we can get our arms around the situation that confronts us. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. And my task as I read the letter is to share a little more experiential about the on-the-ground work that some of us have done over the years and what it grows out of and how we see it. I think that that part of what the consensus is here is that we are at an enormously significant moment in history. And I want to say a little more about that a little later on. And what that means is that sometimes when you say something or propose something or do something, and it's in a certain context, it means one thing. When you say it in another context, it means something quite different. The unity of black people, Latinos, whites, at this point, means something so profound if we can walk that into being. And so I just want to frame that. I bring you greetings from the church that I pastor, Faith Community Church, and I want to claim the tradition of Christendom that I represent, and I want to struggle that most of it is not reflected in Western culture. I want to just make that point. We understand, I understand faith as a vocation. And it's about not just believing something, but acting on that belief. And in that sense, I would prefer it as a verb. Faith means doing something. And in that sense, it is nurturing our internal self. And when I heard the discussion about all of the dimensions that we'll have to engage, part of it is indeed ourselves. Because we have to grow that core self in ourselves in order for our external selves to be what it ought to be and to do what it ought to do. Because if not, then narrowness, selfishness, the lack of courage, the notion that this body and this little space we have in time is kind of sacredly separated from everything else will make our movement open to manipulation and abuse. And so I just want to say that. I'm also the director of the Beloved Community Center in Greensboro, and that tradition is rooted in the legacy and the work and the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in that regard, I want to say that we try to stand for the dignity and the worth and indeed the enormous unrealized potential of everybody, of all of God's children, bar none. Because I do think that even though humanity is scarred with long, how can we say, epochs of evil and behavior, that within us there is a commonality that has to be fought for and has to be pushed for so that we can move forward together. How we do it is somewhat at issue. And so I want to say that I come standing for the dignity and worth of everyone. I want to say a few words about the period we're in to get started. I'm used to a little lectern here, so this is challenging me, but we'll do what we can do. We're in a rare period. People who are students of capitalism and imperialism are familiar with the cycles. There's a cycle, it comes, it goes. There's a certain amount of destruction, and it readjusts itself, and it starts the same thing over again. And what I want to suggest is that while that's going on, we are involved with something, I think, significantly deeper than that. And when you look at it, just looking at the surface of it, I want to lay out three things. That we are the product of the accumulation of all of these crises. It's not just another one. And when you think of the ecological, environmental, global warming crisis, in which the very way the earth is behaving is being challenged, and the polar caps are melting, and the water is heating up, and hurricanes are turning our cities, are revealing the other sins as it blows in. And I argue that there is a New Orleans in every city. It's just that the storm hadn't hit it fully yet. So if you took the implication of just the global warming piece, it would be an enormous challenge. And we don't know what the disease implications are. We don't know all of these implications that are built into this. It's an enormous challenge. And then in this nation, we are caught up in a military, a war, a security crisis, in which the country is so dedicated to killing folk as a way of life. And you know, once you get on that path, you know, the world has been on it all the time, but it's been spotted. But once you get on into a permanent war culture, you transform the very nature of how people think themselves. Otherwise, they couldn't support that. That thinking has to change to line up with the reality and the set of assumptions that the only way to secure our space in the world is have one war after another war after another war. And we're in that period. We're in a war that we have no business in whatsoever, and we have no way out of it. And so it's a messed up situation. We see our security all tied up with it. And so I want to lay out that that's another dimension of the current crisis. And if we look at this finance, this economic, this debt crisis, which is off the chart in terms of all of the things that our brothers and sisters have shared. And what we find is that they aren't separated from each other, that they fold into each other. Each one folds into the other one. The military crisis folds into the economic crisis, and the global warming crisis folds into the military. It's all tied together. And so in that sense, I want to suggest to you that we're not so much dealing with a normal cycle. And I've heard some people compare it this way. They've said that this looks less like a cycle within an epoch and the change of the epoch itself. For example, the magnitude of it need be compared to the change from agriculture to industry, where all of the assumptions that were under play in agriculture are themselves challenged, because the whole thing is beginning to go over and morph over into something else for which we have no experience, and it took 100 years to figure out what that was. And I want to invite you to think a little bit like that, because otherwise I think we'll just be trapped into some ways of thinking that may not be that helpful. Having said that,